She was a rising star with a dazzling smile. He was Hollywood's ultimate bad boy, rebellious, magnetic, and impossible to ignore. When they were cast together in a steamy 1972 film, sparks flew fast and hard. But what started as on-set chemistry quickly spiraled into something much more complicated behind the scenes. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, she wasn't just walking away with a career boost. She was walking away with a secret, a love child for Steve McQueen. So, who was this actress? And what really happened behind the scenes? Join us as we get into all the details. Racing toward greatness. Before the world called him the King of Cool, Steve McQueen was just a nameless, restless kid, one who didn't even feel seen, let alone celebrated. He was born Terrence Stephen McQueen on March 24, 1930, at St. Francis Hospital in Beech Grove, Indiana. His father, William McQueen, was a stunt pilot with a flying circus. His mother, Julia Ann Crawford, was only a teenager when they met, but their romance didn't last. 6 months later, William walked out, leaving Julia alone with a child she was neither ready for nor able to care for. Steve would spend the rest of his life chasing something that left him too early, a sense of belonging. His mother, according to several biographers, struggled with alcoholism and instability. By 1933, when Steve was just 3 years old, she gave up trying. She sent him to live with her parents, Lillian and Victor, in Slater, Missouri. As the Great Depression dragged on, they moved in with Lillian's brother, Claude. Claude's farm gave Steve his first real taste of stability. He would later say he had good memories from those years, mostly because of Claude himself. A strong, fair man who treated Steve with the kind of gentle authority he hadn't known before. On his 4th birthday, Claude gave him a red tricycle. Steve would later say that moment sparked his lifelong love of speed and racing. But just when he started to feel grounded, life shifted again. When Steve was 8, his mother reappeared. She had remarried and insisted he come live with her and his new stepfather in Indianapolis. That move marked the beginning of a darker chapter. Steve struggled to adapt. He was dyslexic and partially deaf from a childhood ear infection, which made school nearly impossible. His stepfather didn't make things any easier. Steve remembered being beaten regularly. At just 9 years old, he packed up and ran away to the streets. Looking back, he said, "When a kid doesn't have any love when he's small, he begins to wonder if he's good enough. My mother didn't love me, and I didn't have a father. I thought, well, I must not be very good." When he turned 12, Julia reached out to Claude again, this time from Los Angeles, where she was now living with yet another husband. Steve returned to her care, but things quickly unraveled again. His new stepfather was just as cruel as the last, and Steve recalled that they locked horns immediately. The abuse returned, and Steve rebelled. Eventually, his mother sent him back to Claude one final time. But this time, Steve didn't stay. At age 14, he left the farm without even saying goodbye. He joined a traveling circus for a short while, then drifted back to Los Angeles. Life there was rough. He fell in with street gangs, committed petty crimes, and was eventually caught stealing hubcaps. When the police handed him over to his stepfather, Steve was beaten so badly that he was thrown down a flight of stairs. That night, he looked up and made a promise. "You lay your stinking hands on me again and I swear I'll you." That threat was the breaking point. His stepfather convinced Julia to have Steve declared incorrigible. A court signed off, and Steve was sent to the California Junior Boys Republic in Chino Hills. At first, Steve didn't fit in there either. He recalled, "Say the boys had a chance once a month to load into a bus and go into town to see a movie. And they lost out because one guy in the bungalow didn't get his work done right." Well, you can pretty well guess they're going to have something to say about that. I paid my dues with the other fellows quite a few times. I got my lumps, no doubt about it. But over time, something changed. Steve started to grow up. He earned respect, was elected to the Boys' Council, and began to take responsibility for himself. The place that was supposed to break him down helped build him up instead. He left the Boys' Republic at 16, but never forgot it. Even after he became a Hollywood star, he returned often to visit the boys still living there, offering them the encouragement he never had. Back with his mother in New York City's Greenwich Village, Steve was still searching. He met two sailors from the Merchant Marine and signed onto a ship headed for the Dominican Republic. But once ashore, he abandoned the job and started drifting again, this time across borders and between odd jobs. He worked briefly in a brothel, sold pens at a carnival, labored as a lumberjack in Canada, and even ended up on a chain gang in the Deep South after a vagrancy arrest. But the turning point came in 1947. Still underage, he asked his mother for permission to enlist in the Marines. She agreed, and Steve was sent to boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina. It wasn't easy. He clashed with authority, went AWOL, and was arrested while hiding out with his girlfriend, Barbara Ross. After resisting arrest, he served 41 days in the brig. Yet again, Steve had to learn the hard way, but this time he stayed the course. After his release, he committed himself to the Marines' discipline. During an Arctic exercise, he saved the lives of 5 fellow soldiers by pulling them from a sinking tank. That act earned him a position in the honor guard assigned to USS Williamsburg, President Truman's personal yacht. When he was honorably discharged in 1950, Steve McQueen walked away a different man. He would later say, "The Marines made a man out of me. I learned how to get along with others, and I had a platform to jump off of." And jump he did. That platform would soon launch him from troubled kid to global icon. McQueen's successful movie career. By 1952, Steve McQueen had no intention of slipping back into the shadows. After surviving a brutal childhood, street life, and military discipline, he was ready to chase something bigger. With the help of the GI Bill, he enrolled in acting classes in New York, studying under Sanford Meisner at the Neighborhood Playhouse and Uta Hagen at HB Studio. He was determined to prove himself, even if it meant starting at the bottom. His first taste of the stage came with just one line in a play produced by Yiddish theater star Molly P. Kahn. The words, "Alles ist verloren," all is lost. It was short, but eerily fitting. For someone who had come from nothing, McQueen knew what those words meant in real life. But he wasn't lost anymore. During this time, he also trained under the legendary Stella Adler, where he met fellow student Gia Scala. But while many aspiring actors spent their nights running lines, Steve had another love competing for his attention: speed. He spent his weekends tearing through motorcycle races at Long Island City Raceway. He bought his first 2 bikes, a Harley-Davidson and a Triumph, and started earning about $100 per weekend, a solid haul for someone juggling small theater roles and side gigs. He wasn't just acting anymore. He was living fast, taking risks, and slowly building the persona that would later define him. Small acting jobs trickled in. He appeared as a musical judge on ABC's Jukebox Jury and took minor roles in stage productions like Peg o' My Heart, The Member of the Wedding, and 2 Fingers of Pride. His Broadway debut came in 1955 with A Hatful of Rain, starring Ben Gazzara. It wasn't fame yet, but it was momentum. Later that year, McQueen packed up and left New York for Los Angeles. He settled into a modest house on Vestal Avenue in Echo Park and started knocking on Hollywood's doors. What happened next would set the wheels in motion for everything that followed. His big break didn't come in a blockbuster, it came through a small part in The Defender, a 2-part episode for Westinghouse Studio One. That's where talent manager Hilly Elkins spotted him. Elkins saw potential and believed McQueen could make his mark in B movies. He landed Steve a minor role in Somebody Up There Likes Me, directed by Robert Wise and starring Paul Newman. More roles followed, first small, then leading. The Blob gave him his first starring part. Then came Never Love a Stranger and The Great St. Louis Bank Robbery. He was starting to turn heads, but it was television that truly launched him. In 1958, he landed a guest role on Tales of Wells Fargo, playing Bill Longley. Around the same time, Elkins convinced producer Vincent M. Fennelly to let Steve audition for the role of Josh Randall, a bounty hunter on the series Track Down. Steve made 2 appearances, first as Randall opposite his old motorcycle buddy Robert Culp, then again as twin brothers, one of whom was an outlaw. The reaction was strong. Producers quickly spun the character into his own show. That fall, CBS launched Wanted Dead or Alive, and Steve McQueen officially arrived. His portrayal of the quiet, unpredictable bounty hunter made him a household name. According to Culp, he even taught McQueen the art of the fast draw. But by day 2 of filming, McQueen was already faster. Wanted Dead or Alive cemented his star power. But it was a call from Frank Sinatra that changed the game completely. In 1959, Sinatra removed Sammy Davis Jr. from the war film Never So Few, allegedly over an offhand radio comment, and gave the role to McQueen. It was a huge vote of confidence, and Sinatra made sure the camera paid attention. McQueen's character, Bill Ringa, was all attitude, tearing through jungle roads in a Jeep, flashing switchblades and handling a Tommy gun like he'd been born with it. Critics took notice. Director John Sturges certainly did. He immediately cast McQueen in The Magnificent Seven, promising to give him the camera. And he did. McQueen played Vin Tanner, quiet, lethal, and unforgettable. Even in a cast full of heavyweights like Yul Brynner, Charles Bronson, and James Coburn, Steve stole scenes with the tiniest gestures, spinning his shotgun, adjusting his hat, or casually checking his gun in the background. It drove Brynner crazy. But for McQueen, it was calculated. Every flick of the wrist, every extra movement was his way of making sure audiences never looked away. His performance was sharp, magnetic, and just unpredictable enough to make everyone else on screen fade. The Magnificent Seven was a hit, and it gave McQueen something he'd never had before: control. But while McQueen certainly made a name for himself with The Magnificent Seven, there were tensions between him and Yul Brynner, the fight that almost ruined The Magnificent Seven. Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai inspired countless remakes, but none made waves quite like John Sturges' 1960 Western adaptation, The Magnificent Seven. With a stacked cast of Hollywood heavyweights, including Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen, it should have been cinematic harmony. But behind the camera, a clash of egos set the set ablaze, and at the center of it all was a rivalry that would stretch far beyond the final shot. According to Yul Brynner, a biography, the feud started before cameras even rolled. McQueen was unhappy. His character only had 7 lines in the original script, and while that might have been fine for a lesser actor, it wasn't going to fly with him. Director John Sturges offered McQueen more influence behind the scenes to keep him happy, a compromise that Brynner would quickly regret. Armed with his newfound clout, McQueen found subtle but cutting ways to pull the spotlight onto himself. While Brynner, the official lead of the film, delivered monologues, McQueen would fidget, rattling shotgun shells, flipping coins, or shifting in the background just enough to draw the audience's eye. When that wasn't enough, he went for physical mischief. Brynner, known for boosting his height with small dirt mounds, was furious when McQueen quietly leveled them between takes. Things reached a boiling point when Brynner finally confronted him in front of the crew, grabbing him in frustration. McQueen later admitted in Steve McQueen, a biography, "We didn't get along. Brynner grabbed me in front of everyone, angry about something. He doesn't ride well and knows nothing about guns, so maybe he thought I represented a threat. It wasn't just personal, it was professional pride. McQueen was a natural with weapons and stunts. Brenner, not so much. Co-stars noticed the tension too. Robert Vaughn wrote in his memoir, A Fortunate Life, Steve was intensely competitive. It wasn't enough just to be successful, he had to be more successful than anyone else. James Coburn, another member of the iconic Seven, also found himself on shaky ground with McQueen during filming. Still, not everyone clashed with the King of Cool. Charles Bronson reportedly had a great relationship with McQueen, on and off the set. Their wives became close friends, and their bond stayed intact long after the cameras stopped rolling. But the McQueen-Brenner feud dragged on for years until McQueen's final days. Battling cancer, he reportedly called Brenner to clear the air. "You could have had me kicked off the movie when I rattled you," he told him, "but you let me stay, and that picture made me. So thanks." Brenner responded, "I am the king, and you are the rebel prince, every bit as royal and dangerous to cross." In the end, The Magnificent Seven gave the world more than just a Western classic. It gave us a legendary behind-the-scenes standoff between two titans of cinema, each vying for the crown, each too proud to back down. But while Yul Brynner and Steve McQueen clashed in front of the camera, there was another battle brewing just beneath the surface, one that had nothing to do with film credits or camera angles. It was the fight McQueen waged in his personal life, the one no director could control and no script could tidy up. The dark side of Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen's love life was anything but ordinary. With 3 marriages and a long list of affairs, including a fiery but short-lived romance with Ali MacGraw, his relationships were often just as intense and volatile as the characters he played on screen. His first wife, Nyla Adams, married him in 1956 and stayed for 16 years before finally walking away in 1972. A year later, he married Ali MacGraw, only for that union to crash and burn by 1978. His final marriage to Barbara Minty came in 1980, just months before his death. But no one got closer to the real Steve McQueen, the one hidden behind the smoldering blue eyes and cocky smile, than Neely Adams. And when she found herself staring down the barrel of a gun he was pointing at her head, she realized something chilling. The man she thought she knew wasn't a tragic anti-hero. He was exactly like the dangerous men he played, maybe even worse. Adams first met McQueen in the 1950s after moving to the United States from the Philippines. They fell hard and fast, got married, and had 2 children together. But the fantasy quickly faded. She discovered her husband was a chronic cheater, and worse, he didn't try to hide it. He expected her to accept it, and she did for a while. She also knew about his addictions. McQueen had a long list of vices, including a serious coke habit that would eventually bring out the darkest parts of him. One night, he wanted to get high and begged her to join him. Adams resisted, but he kept pushing. He allegedly told her, "I wish you wouldn't fight me on this. I promise you a little coke will make you feel better. I don't want you feeling bad, baby. No matter what happens, you're still my baby." Against her better judgment, she gave in. But that night spiraled into something she never forgot. As the drugs kicked in, McQueen grew paranoid. He started accusing her of cheating. Adams, fed up, tried to defuse his tantrum with sarcasm. "Honey bunny, yours is not the only golden cock keck in the West, you know," she told him. It was the only defense she had left. Mockery. Then, twisting the knife, she added that the man she was supposedly sleeping with had even won an Academy Award. That sent McQueen over the edge. He stormed out, wild-eyed and sniffing, only to return minutes later with a gun. He pressed the weapon to her temple, leaned in close, and hissed, "You'd better tell me now, or you're not going to live to see him die. And I promise you I'll find out who the motherfucker is." Make no mistake about that. For McQueen, dominance wasn't optional. It was the rule. He could sleep with whomever he wanted, even sex workers, but Adams? Her body belonged to him. Any suspicion of betrayal sent him into a jealous rage. So, when she became pregnant a month or so after the gun incident, he flat out refused to believe the baby was his. Instead of joy, there were accusations, interrogations, and manipulation until he broke her down completely. Under immense emotional pressure, she flew from France to Britain and terminated the pregnancy. As much as I would have wanted to have a new baby, she later wrote, there was no way I could withstand both the continuing physical and mental abuse and a pregnancy. I had to find out what the procedure would be. That possessiveness didn't end with her. When McQueen met Ali MacGraw on the set of The Getaway, sparks flew instantly, even though MacGraw was still married. She was already a Hollywood darling, fresh off the massive success of Love Story, one of the biggest hits of the 70s. But once they got married, McQueen cut her career short. He didn't want his wife acting in any more romantic roles, and that was the end of it. MacGraw disappeared from the big screen for years, only resurfacing after they split in 1978. Just like Adams, MacGraw became a prisoner of his paranoia. She endured the same obsessive questioning, the same emotional warfare, and the same volatility. Behind closed doors, McQueen was a man consumed by control, fueled by insecurity, addiction, and the fear of being outshined. By the time he met Barbara Minty in 1979, his health was already in decline. They got married on January 16, 1980, less than a year before he passed. In her memoir, Steve McQueen, The Last Mile, Minty described a man who had turned to faith near the end. With help from his flying instructor, Sammy Mason, and his son Pete, McQueen reconnected with his Catholic roots and became an evangelical Christian. He even began attending Ventura Missionary Church and was visited by evangelist Billy Graham shortly before his death. But the damage had already been done. For all his swagger and talent, Steve McQueen's private world was a far cry from the freedom and rebellion he so famously portrayed. Behind the legend was a man who demanded control at any cost, even if it meant destroying the very people who loved him. The world saw a rebel, a star, a hero, but those closest to him knew the truth. Steve McQueen lived on the edge, not just on screen, but in every corner of his life, especially when it came to love. And nowhere was that more obvious than during the chaotic summer of 1972, when an on-set romance spun wildly out of control. Who did Steve McQueen get pregnant while filming this 1972 movie? According to Love Story star Ali MacGraw, her affair with Steve McQueen felt almost inevitable. When their paths crossed in the early 70s, both were at the peak of their fame. She, the newly crowned Hollywood sweetheart; he, the tough-as-nails king of cool with a reputation for being as wild off-screen as he was on it. McQueen had clawed his way up from a difficult childhood to become Hollywood's go-to macho leading man. Meanwhile, MacGraw, daughter of two artists, had just broken out with 1969's Goodbye, Columbus, followed by a star-making performance in Love Story that turned her into a household name. When they met on the set of The Getaway in 1972, the chemistry was instant. MacGraw was still married to powerful Paramount producer Robert Evans, with whom she had a young son. Evans had cast her in Love Story, and their glamorous marriage was one of the industry's golden unions. But when McQueen walked onto that Texas set, everything changed. She almost turned the role down, not just to stay home with her son, as she told the press, but because deep down she sensed trouble. In her memoir, Moving Pictures, MacGraw confessed, "The real reason I had hesitated was that I knew I was going to get in some serious trouble with Steve." She was right. This was a man who could walk into any room and man, woman, and child all would go, "Whoa, what's that?" she told People in 2018. And I was no exception. The moment filming began, their affair took off. "I was obsessed with Steve from the moment he stepped into my world," she wrote. There was never enough air for me to breathe to change that feeling. The press couldn't get enough of them, and the relationship powered the film's buzz. The Getaway became a hit, but their off-screen drama was what really captivated the public. By the end of that year, MacGraw had left Evans. In July 1973, she married McQueen. But from the very beginning, the marriage came with conditions. McQueen insisted she sign a prenup that said she'd take nothing in the event of a divorce, and she did. He also demanded that she quit acting altogether. At the peak of her career, MacGraw stepped away from the spotlight to stay home and raise her son, as McQueen requested. For a while, they were happy, but the cracks started to show. McQueen's drinking and drug use were constant, and MacGraw was quietly battling her own struggles with alcohol. She later told Oprah that she never felt safe enough in her relationships to speak her mind. She was always afraid that if she did, she'd be left. As time went on, McQueen's possessiveness became more obvious. He moved out of their shared home and into a Beverly Hills hotel. MacGraw heard whispers of infidelity and then acted on her own. "I began to cheat too," she admitted in her memoir. "I needed an escape." In 1977, things reached a breaking point. MacGraw told McQueen she wanted to return to acting. His response was cold and final. "In that case, we are filing for divorce." She took a role in 1978's Convoy anyway, and though they briefly reconciled, it didn't last. That same year, their marriage officially ended. McQueen died of lung cancer just 2 years later, in 1980 at the age of 50. MacGraw returned to acting in the 80s, appearing in films and even starring in Dynasty for a short run, but she never remarried. Instead, she left Hollywood behind and made a new life in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where she's remained sober for decades. Reflecting on her time with McQueen, she told People in 2018, "I wish we had both grown old sober. There were wonderful days and dreadful days." But while his relationships are explosive at best, Steve McQueen was even more daring and explosive on set, doing most of his stunts himself. Hollywood's fastest actor, Steve McQueen didn't just play daredevils on screen. He was one. While most actors relied on stunt doubles, McQueen lived for the rush. Whether behind the wheel of a muscle car or tearing through dirt trails on a motorcycle, he had the skill and guts of a pro racer. When the script called for high-speed chases or heart-pounding jumps, McQueen was the guy who said, "Let me do it." In Bullet, he famously tackled much of the film's iconic car chase himself, burning rubber through San Francisco. And in The Great Escape, McQueen thrilled audiences with a motorcycle chase that became legendary. Though his close friend Bud Ekins performed the famous fence jump, McQueen was still everywhere on screen, even chasing himself. Thanks to clever editing, racing wasn't just a hobby for him. He seriously considered going pro. In 1961, he entered the British Touring Car Championship in a Mini and finished an impressive third. At the 1970 12 Hours of Sebring, McQueen and co-driver Peter Revson came just 21 seconds behind Mario Andretti, and McQueen raced with a cast on his broken foot. He later used the same Porsche 908 as a camera car in Le Mans, his passion project. McQueen wanted to race in the actual 24 Hours of Le Mans, even considering teaming up with Formula One legend Jackie Stewart. But the studio refused to risk their star, so he chose film over racing reluctantly. Off-road, McQueen was just as fearless. Under the alias Harvey Mushman, he tore through brutal events like the Baja 1000, the Mint 400, and the Elsinore Grand Prix. In 1964, McQueen and Bud Ekins joined the first official U.S. team to compete in the grueling international 6 days trial in East Germany. Both crashed out by day 3, but their effort made headlines. Motorcycle Sport magazine called their riding full of dash, if not admirable style. By 1971, McQueen was immersed in the scene. He helped fund On Any Sunday, the beloved motorcycle documentary, and appeared on the cover of Sports Illustrated riding a Husqvarna dirt bike. He even invented and patented a custom racing bucket seat that year, and gave the Ed Sullivan Show a wild moment by blasting through the desert in a dune buggy with the host riding shotgun. Sullivan's verdict? That was a hell of a ride. But all that speed came with a dark side. McQueen's son Chad said his father owned over 100 classic motorcycles and as many vintage cars. He also drank heavily, used cocaine, and smoked marijuana daily. In 1972, he was arrested for DUI in Alaska. By 1978, the recklessness caught up with him. A persistent cough turned out to be pleural mesothelioma, a deadly cancer linked to asbestos exposure. McQueen blamed it on his Marine days, scraping insulation off pipes aboard a ship. But his racing suits and movie sets may have contributed too. When doctors in the U.S. gave up, McQueen went to Mexico in July 1980 for controversial treatment with William Donald Kelly, a former orthodontist offering coffee enemas, live cell injections, and Litriol, a toxic, debunked cancer cure. Kelly promised a miracle. McQueen paid him up to $40,000 a month in cash. By October, the cancer had spread everywhere. Massive tumors bloated his stomach, but Kelly still insisted he'd recover. In November, McQueen secretly checked into a small clinic in Juarez under the name Samuel Shepard to undergo a risky operation to remove a 5-pound tumor. Doctors had warned him it could kill him. They were right. On November 7, 1980, Steve McQueen died of a heart attack just 12 hours after surgery. He was 50 years old. He passed quietly with his family by his side. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean, the place he always said gave him peace. From the streets of San Francisco to the deserts of Baja, from movie sets to racetracks, Steve McQueen lived life on full throttle, raw, unfiltered, and always just a little out of control. Which Steve McQueen movie is your favorite to this very day? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.